Get started here. I am excited to see so many of you here today. We are getting ready for our session on cracking the code, a senior technical interview. So I'm excited to welcome you all to this session. I'm joined by three U of M alums who are also Microsoft employees. So we'll jump in and get started. So I'm Chrissy Jensen. I use she, her pronouns. I work as the Assistant Director of Career Counseling in CSE Career Services. I know we have people from all different colleges joining us today. So again, welcome to all of you. This is kind of the plan that we have for today. We've got about an hour together. We'll do some introductions and our panelists will kind of walk you through their brief career journeys. We will do an overview of what technical interviews might be, have a live demo, which I'm excited about to see how this is actually done. And then we'll have about 15 minutes at the end of our session for you all to ask questions and share a couple of resources as well. So I'm recording the session. I will be sending out the recording link to all of the registered guests today, so you will get a copy of that at the end as well. So if you have any logistical questions, feel free to type that in the chat. But if you've got questions on content, feel free to hold on to those questions until the end of our session when we've got that reserved time, and then we'll get into your questions then. All right, so let's get to meet our content experts. I'm going to have the three of you just do your brief introduction now, name, title, and then we'll do your career journey in a minute here. But Mitra, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, for sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Mitra Keon. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a software for hardware, which is kind of just a fancy way of saying firmware, product manager here at Microsoft. And I work in the Surface organization making laptops and pro devices.
Hey everyone, my name is Zachary Riffle. I'm a security architect, and I am focused on building out solutions with some of our strategic partners like Dell and Verizon, and then also startups, whether it be some you have heard of, some you might not have heard of, even some in recent YC classes.
Hi everyone. My name is Lucas Reese. I work as a software engineer in Azure, specifically Azure Core. The team that I'm on works on the management of extensions and VMs at runtime. So yeah.
Great. Thank you, three, for being here and sharing with us all of your knowledge. All right, so we're just going to jump into career stories. Zachary, do you want to kick us off and share a little bit about your background?
Yeah, I would love to. So I was not in CSC. I was actually in CSOM, and I took a bit of an unconventional journey from CSOM. I'm an MIS, Management Information Systems major, and I was actually in the consulting club at the time, and that's when I realized consulting wasn't for me, and so I quit the consulting club, and at the same time. It was around COVID, and there was this big hack happening, the SolarWinds hack, that essentially went all the way to Pennsylvania Ave in the White House. And I was kind of wondering, how could the breach of some little known software vendor most of us had never even heard of, go all the way to the White House and into the Treasury and some of our agencies. So I took a great information security course, and that hack was happening at the same time, and it really sparked my interest. And so I started to dive into cybersecurity. I applied to Microsoft with no referrals. It's possible, and it does happen all the time. So if you are a junior or even a senior, and the thought of working for like a FANG or big tech company is kind of daunting to you, I would say just go for it, and do your best. I have some tips and tricks listed here before I hand it off. I would say get creative. Um, we receive a lot of resumes for a lot of different roles. A lot of people want to be a SWE. A lot of people might want to be a PM at Microsoft. And if you have a creative project, or even if it's a passion project unrelated to what you would do for Microsoft, it just helps you stand out. And this is a story I like to share just from 2 weeks ago, but we had an applicant that used Vercel to completely recreate TechCrunch. And it was faster, it was more efficient, it looked way better. and it stuck, and that applicant ended up getting hired. So if you have a passion project or want to get creative, do that. Be able to talk through your resume. A lot of the first wave interviews are just like a 30-minute behavioral screen and phone call. We're just looking to make sure you're like a good person, and that you can talk through your experiences. Be authentic, be on time, use STAR method. I think we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Uh, my fourth bullet point here is the one I want to emphasize the most, and that's stressing impact over experience. So a lot of candidates in Microsoft or a big tech firm will have impressive experience. Maybe they did an internship at like Intel or Dell or Adobe or 3M, US Bank, all the companies just in our back door in Minneapolis. But what was the impact that you drove there? And then show a clear career arc. Why are you a good fit to be a SWE? Why are you a good fit to be in cybersecurity? For Mitra, why are you a good fit, to work on Surface or to work with firmware and so on. So we want to see basically that you will grow with a tech company. You're not spending a year and leaving.
Oh,
Yeah, I'm on
yeah,
mute.
let's
Sorry
see.
about that. I said thank you. We'll go on to Lucas.
That's it. Yeah. All right, my career journey. Mine was a little more non-traditional, I guess I'd say. I originally had came to college right out of high school and it dropped out at 20. I'd spent about a decade actually after that working at the elementary and middle school level, working in a few different roles from teaching assistant to softball coach, Lego robotics coach, summer nanny. It was actually one of the principals at the middle school I'd worked with who had encouraged me to go back and finish my degree. And so that kind of brought me back into tech. But I think I know for me, when I first kind of entered the space and tried to find my way, learning to kind of get familiar and comfortable sharing my story and some of the things that maybe I look back on and regretted or wasn't sure how it would be received if I had a bad semester, a few classes that didn't go so well, and learning, to share also the strengths of that and the uniqueness of that as well too. And so, I think, I guess to call out for anyone who kind of has those different life life events or paths that come up, that I think that there's ways to kind of grow through that and learn how to like really identify what maybe is special about your perspective or that experience that shaped you. And, that's something that you can then share later on for an employer. And so that maybe you don't always have to be an exact, whatever, perfect, you know, X or Y or something, but you can kind of learn through that. I guess across the both college times that I had spent, I was in a few different roles. I was a CA, TA, did the competitive programming club, running club. I did some research with a chemie professor. Was also in a pre-med track at one point, and so was part of Minnesota Future Doctors and had some interesting experiences. But that I would say when it came to then trying to put myself in a position in which I was, either at a career fair or applying for companies, I tried to be really thoughtful about how I approached that. So it was finding time during winter break or summer break to work on leak code. So I didn't necessarily have to practice that as much throughout the year. And I think that gave me a little bit of a base, to go off of. I think also I would front load the number of places that I would apply to towards like the beginning of the semester before the semester started. That way I wouldn't have to take as much time from my classwork to look for positions or do interviews. And it gave me a sense of like the sort of traction that I was getting given my resume. And I would take advantage of all the different career center events as well too, where they'd have resume reviews. So making sure I was refining it, I'm making sure the formatting was good, and everything kind of made sense. And so I think kind of getting utilizing some of those resources and coaching that you can get along the way, I think can just help you to keep refining your process. As it related to, I think, interview loops and stuff like that, I think there's some companies that are a little more technical. So I know, for instance, when I interviewed with Caterpillar, it didn't require any sort of coding portion, whereas when I did Microsoft or Amazon, there was a much more extensive one that I had to go through. And so I think yeah, so I guess each process, there's the behavioral side, there's also the technical side, and I know we're going to probably discuss a little more in detail in a bit. That technical side, some of the questions that you can expect, and the approach that we'll hopefully can use in order to be successful. And I think even when you don't necessarily know fully but you can make progress, and sometimes they will help you along the way if you have a question or if you reach a roadblock and stuff like that. So, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, Mitra.
Well, that was an awesome story. Thank you for sharing with us, Lucas, and also Zachary. So hi everybody. Like I said before, my name is Mitra. I studied electrical engineering and comp sci as a minor at the U, and graduated last May. So I'm relatively fresh to working in the industry. Throughout my time in college, I was pretty involved in on campus. And was able to like create like leadership positions for myself and like fall into leadership roles, which I think had a really big impact as I was applying to become a product manager. So I was involved in the Persian Student Organization of Minnesota, the Science and Engineering Student Board. I was in MSA back when, or USG back when it was the Minnesota Student Association, and also really enjoyed my time participating in research and being a teaching assistant in the comp sci department. So a lot of fun experiences at the U. Um, for me, I think I had like a kind of like more traditional route into tech. I had a bunch of internships starting late in high school and then throughout college. So I worked in Google as like a high school summer intern, really tiny, like 8 week internship, but that was a lot of fun. I did solar design on like a more electrical focused component at Apadana Solar Technologies, and then I went and did a co-op for 6 months at Medtronic, working on their cardiac rhythm management devices and creating like a firmware platform for them there. And then the summer before my senior year, got an internship at Microsoft, and then did my internship there, went really well, but unfortunately I got hit with a hiring freeze, so I couldn't get extended a return offer right away. But through a lot of emailing and persistence and just poking every recruiter I could find, was able to get my return offer extended to me a few months after finishing my internship. So that's how I landed here at Microsoft. I'd say my biggest tips that I think worked well for me, and like I don't think that there's like one clear-cut path into how you can break into tech. I think a lot of people go through different channels and different avenues, and like, we all end up here in different ways, which is a lot of fun. But I think for me, like the thing which probably helped my application the most was how many internships that I had as well as personal projects. I think that like exactly as Zach was saying earlier, like making sure that you're writing about your internships using the STAR method, like emphasizing the situation. What was the task? What action did you take? And then like what were the results? Posing everything in like a very result-oriented way, I think helps demonstrate impact to whatever hiring team you're working with. And then also if you showcase that like you've done personal projects, I think that it's like, oh, like this person isn't just like doing these things because it's gonna look good on their resume and they're getting paid to do it. It shows like a level of um like interest and initiative outside of like the things that you already kind of have to do. So I consistently found recruiters like asking me about like the personal projects that I did because they're like, oh, that sounds cool. I went and made a crowdsourced restroom rating app. So like if you were in the middle of who knows where. I was at a protest in the Capitol. I'm like, what is the cleanest, most like I don't know, like I think it was like cleanliness, like price based, and then also like distance. How can I use these three metrics to find a public restroom which is near me? And the recruiters thought that was hilarious. So I think that honestly is what got me my internship. But then also a lot, I think like the really important thing is to like fine tune your resume to make sure it passes through an ATS scanner. A lot of times these days, our resumes are unfortunately no longer reviewed by humans. It's just like a robot. So making sure that like you're including the keywords and like if you're doing a personal project in Python and using like XYZ API or whatever tools you're focusing on, making sure you list that out so like the scanner can pick up on it. And that will help move your resume along. Oh, ATS, it's called Application Tracking System. If you go and search like ATS scanners, I can go and find one online and drop a link. It'll go and like read your resume and then compare it to like whatever job listing you have and then do like a keyword search to see like how good of a fit your resume is for that job listing. But I just went and did that a bunch of times and was able to get my resume to a level of fidelity which matched like the job listing that I was applying to and eventually got the job. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you all for sharing. I love that you all have different backgrounds, but kind of emphasize similar things, getting experience, knowing how to talk about your experience in a way that's impactful, a variety of different types of experiences and paths, and even different types of interviews that you experienced as well. But could you talk us through what technical interviews mean, what they look like, just things that you came into with your own experiences, and any additional tips for students before we do our live demo?
Yeah, let's see. So I guess I would say some of the ones that I've experienced more firsthand. So there have been companies that have sent maybe a technical screen where the first step is not even necessarily talking to someone, but it's like, oh, they picked up your resume and they're going to give you sort of some time sensitive problem, and most likely you might be also recorded as well too as you're trying to solve it. And they might look at your answer, how long it took you to get there, um, if you explained anything along the way. I would say when I think of the two interviews, I think in my mind that stand out from an experience standpoint was probably both the Microsoft or the Amazon one. The Microsoft, after kind of the initial phone screen, then I got routed to the final round, and this was for the internship. And I had one with the engineering manager and another one with the senior engineer. And I think um, I think the expectation or the hope is along the way that was I discussing and explaining my answer? Was I asking clarifying questions on what I was being asked to solve, if there were certain edge cases or things that I was making sure to consider? If I was able to answer questions about the time complexity or the space complexity. And just showing that the answer that I was providing was efficient and that it involved just good coding practices as well too. And so I think yeah, just all of that stuff. I think they definitely look at as well as the degree of and how challenging the problem they gave you as well too. But I think sometimes I think if you just come across as really an open, um, curious, kind person, I feel like that can also go a long way in terms of them wanting to support you and help you and have you do your best as well. But yeah.
I'm gonna jump in just based on what you just said. I feel like a lot of the students that I talk with get very nervous about needing to do their interview perfectly. And it's a lot of pressure. You're on the spot, you're being evaluated. But over and over again, I hear from employers, be authentic, be your real self. So to your point, Lucas, of like ask questions, be curious. I think employers are going to definitely value that approach better than trying to interview perfectly because nobody is perfect and it will be hard to put that amount of pressure on yourself as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I think another really important thing to emphasize is a technical interview. Yes, it's an opportunity to go and show off like your super awesome coding skills, but I think the crux of what that interview is trying to achieve, like they just really want to understand what your thought process is like. How do you break down a problem? So if you're able to go and communicate to your interviewer like, "Hey, I'm seeing this problem. This is what I think I should do," asking the clarifying questions. Um, they just like want to see that you're able to like digest a problem and like come up with some sort of solution and be able to communicate how you would go about solving it to them. I went through one coding interview where I just completely forgot how to implement a linked list. I was like, I have no idea what the syntax is for this. I haven't done this in probably a year and a half because I'm an EE. I don't really do that much like Python programming in my day to day, but I'm just was very, very open and honest with the interviewer. I'm like, I know that this is the data structure that I think I'd be able to implement like my solution with. This is why I'm choosing to use it. I think that this will be more efficient for XYZ reason as opposed to using this other thing. And I got the job the next day. They're like the fact that you're able to just go and speak through the solution, if you even if like you mess up like the syntax or you don't remember what the syntax is, um, that is super, super valuable to them. So being able to explain your decisions and like the trade-offs that you're making as you implement your solution is really important.
I would add in like that's everything of a technical interviewer. And now it might be different for like a SWE role than a cybersecurity role, since a lot of what we do is like detection engineering, trying to pick up like cybersecurity alerts or incidents. So sometimes it's in Python or VS. A lot of times it's just in like SQL or what we call KQL, Kusto Query Language. It's like another query language. That part doesn't matter. What matters in the interviews, so you're able to talk through like what's the goal, what's the context, what's the expectations, and if we can hear you talk through your thought process and you understand, I think I added this last point here if I remember, if you understand the patterns of what you're looking for, it's everything. And the syntax might break, something might not deploy. It happens to everyone. So like Chrissy said, we're not looking for perfect. We just want to hear that you're able to talk through everything. And we made a great comment to start early. Lucas did in the chat. I just want to say that's very important. We open a lot of our positions in, I want to say it's like July or August for the following year. So if you're a senior, I would recommend, if I could go back in time, I'd recommend starting in like June, or if you have some downtime in the summer after you wrap up your finals and you're just chipping away your internship, I would recommend starting in June or July because those roles will open up in July or August. And they are highly competitive. And the earlier you get in there, the better. We opened a position, this was a couple weeks ago, and there were just hundreds of applicants. And the earliest ones stand out because a lot of the times, I'll be honest, you're competing against like the whole Cal State school system for a lot of these tech roles. So if whether you're from the U or from another Big Ten school, getting in early will help you get your foot in the door.
With your own search process, that application window, did you notice a difference with the different types of companies you were applying to? Like big tech versus smaller local companies and different application windows that you might have noticed?
Yeah, I think for me, I think the first year I wondered had I applied for Microsoft a little bit earlier when the application window had opened, if I would have been able to be an intern, maybe my first year or second year. And then the next summer when I'd found out maybe a little more about how important it was to kind of apply a little bit earlier, I think that was maybe a bit helpful, but still, I think sometimes it can, like, I know Microsoft, I think notoriously, even if you put an application, and then been in a few months until, some candidates might hear that first reach out email back. But yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think it also like depending on the type of company, like the timing at which like you apply may differ. And I think a lot of these like big tech roles, I know are on like a rolling basis. So for like Microsoft, um, I think my application for like my like product management job opened or like this is for my internship. It opened like July 30th and I applied like August 1st. And that was the year that I was able to get it. But like they kept the application open for like a few months. So they'll still continue accepting the applications, but I don't know if it's like diminishing likelihood. But like there were other jobs that I've applied to like later in March. Um, like I think for I was applying for a job at Meta and then another job for at Amazon and one at Nvidia. And like all of those applications for post grad roles open like March or like April timeframe. I think like internships are normally earlier, but like full-time positions, they kind of just like come throughout the course of the year. I think like the biggest thing is just as soon as you see an application open, apply as quickly as you can.
I I think for me, going back, I went through the interview cycles at Microsoft, Adobe, and then ServiceNow, and all of them started in that essentially right when I was starting my senior year at the U, so around August or September. But Lucas made a great point. The process took forever. Oh, it was like pins and needles because you might do an interview and then wait like a month to a month and a half, and then you hear back and you might do the next round. So I think the interview process at ServiceNow was 6 interviews, and at Microsoft it was 5, I want to say, for my position. And over the course of that time, it just kind of consumed up most of the fall, all the way through I think October and November. So the earlier you start, the better. I know for new grad roles, Mitra, you made a great point. Like some of the openings might just be like a bucket. Like it might be like software engineering or like customer success. And then you just apply and there's multiple roles within that bucket. Other times I see some that kind of pop up and go away within a couple weeks. So my biggest piece of advice would be if you're going into your senior year right now, and if you're a junior, I would start getting ready in like June and July to start rapid fire applying in August.
Thank you. Also do a little plug for the career fair. If you're a CSE student or in studying topics that are relevant to CSE employers, you can always come to that fair in September. Um, Companies that we have vary each year, but that's a great place to find out about opportunities for that upcoming summer or the following year as well. All right, so we are going to transition into the live interview demonstration. So Mitra is now our interviewer for the day, and Lucas is going to be the candidate. So I'm going to stop screen sharing and I will let Lucas share his screen. And then I will let the two of you take it from here and see how a actual coding interview might look.
Hi, Lucas. Nice to meet you. My name is Mitra. I'm going to be your interviewer for the day.
Nice to meet you too, Mitra. So happy and grateful for the opportunity to talk with you and hopefully, yeah, be considered for this role.
Yes, well, we're very excited to be talking to you today as well. So for this interview, I'm wondering what is your preferred programming language?
I would say most likely Python. It was the first language I started working with and learning, and I know there's a lot of great methods that you can use when working with that. So maybe I'd lean toward Python.
Okay, awesome. Well, then let's move forward in conducting this programming interview in Python then. The problem that we have here today is we're going to give you two strings, and we want you to return the value true if the strings are anagrams. So, do you know what an anagram is?
Um, I no, could you explain what an anagram?
Yes, of course. So an anagram is basically like, well, I'm about to give a really terrible explanation of what an anagram is. An anagram is basically like a string of letters which contains all of the same letters within. Oh, it looks like somebody had this as one of their skills assessment questions already. That's awesome, Sadie. An anagram is basically when you have a string of letters that contains all of the letters for a word. So take the word anagram that we see here in example one.
Yep.
Um, the string S is the original word, and then the string, which is in variable T, which is Nagaram, nagaram, is an anagram for the word anagram. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah, yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, so then an example of something which isn't an anagram would be like the word rat and car, because you can't go and rearrange all of the letters in the word car um, to spell rat. So that returns false.
Okay, yeah, cool. So I should then, I guess, make some sort of function that can determine if something is an anagram or not. Um, I guess a few early questions. In terms of the input, what can I expect? Is it going to be all lowercase? Should I consider if there's uppercase or any other sorts of characters?
That's a really good point. For this problem, I'm not entirely sure. We're gonna say let's assume that it can be it's gonna be all lowercase in your
Sweet.
string input.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. That sounds good. I'll make sure to only consider that. Can I be given um basically an empty string as well too? Is that a potential case that I should be able to consider or factor in?
Based off of this constrict, can you scroll down and show me the
Oh shoot, yeah.
constraint? Awesome. Based off of this problem, it looks like the string length has to be um greater than or equal to length one. So you won't be getting any empty strings, but that's a really good edge case to think about.
Okay. And I'm assuming if they're different lengths, then it would be most likely impossible for them to be an anagram because there would be a character that one would have that the other would be missing.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. Yeah, cool. That makes sense. I guess I'm gonna maybe just write a few comments to describe what I want to do. So I think I'm gonna maybe check right away if they have the same length, because that way I won't necessarily evaluate it if they are different lengths. So check if they are the same length. And then after I check that they're the same length, I think what I would want to do is use something like a dictionary. And that dictionary, I could store each value as I loop over the string. And if there's multiple characters, I'll just increment the frequency of that character. And then so yeah, maybe I'll type that in as well too. Um, let's see, let's say I'll create two dictionaries. So one for each string. Create two dictionaries, loop over the string, store the character frequency. Um, so after I do that, um, I guess the hope is, or I would then compare both dictionaries. So if the dictionaries are identical in terms of their content, meaning that they have the same character frequencies, then I'll assume that it is an anagram because that just means that they have all of the same characters, and then I'll return that. So I'll compare two dictionaries, and um, return true if they are equal. All right, so that's kind of a rough outline of I think how I'm going to go about encode this. So I'll say if len of s is not equal to len of t, then I'm going to return false because that wouldn't work. Actually,
Mhm.
maybe I'll put this right underneath the comments. That way it's more obvious. Let's see. Now I'm going to create two dictionaries. So we'll call it book one equals uh, actually maybe I'll call it book S and then book T. That way it's more obvious what is related to what. Oh, okay, and now I'm going to loop over the string. I will do maybe this under, I could do this under in two ways. Maybe I'll do it this way. Um, Given the fact that I know both strings are the same length, um, I'm going to do everything under one loop rather than making separate loops for each dictionary that I'm creating. And then I'll say if S of I is not in book S, then I'm going to add that character to it equals one. And then if it already is, then I'm going to increment that even more. Plus equals one. And then similarly, I'll do this for T as well too. But one thing I'm noticing is that I've called it book and I haven't necessarily, it's not the complete name. This is book S that I'm looking for here. And then this is book T here as well too. All right. Maybe I'll just quick test this before even though I feel okay about it, I just want to see if there's any issue with it if I was to do a quick dry run here. So we'll say print book S and see what it looks like. Um, I guess I'll return true, but I'm just really looking for the print statement. We'll run this and see print array. Oh, let me see. I see what I did. I
Nice.
made a
Good
mistake
catch.
there. Shoot. Okay. Let's see. Okay. I'm gonna print this again. We'll see what is I guess that's expected. Okay, so now all I need to do, I think, is return book S equals book T, since both of the dictionaries are created now. And if they do match up, they'll return true. If they don't, it'll return false. Okay. Looks like it was good for the first two cases. Maybe I'll submit it because I know there's 50 or however many cases they use. Okay. So it looks like it works. Yeah, this is my answer.
Nice. Okay. Well, would you be able to tell me a little bit more about why you decided to move forward with a dictionary rather than some sort of other data structure?
Yeah. That is a good question. I know. Um, so one other approach that I could have done for this problem was um, sorted the uh, list of characters here. So I could have called like sorted S and then sorted T and compared them. The thing about, like, for instance, that approach is that the time complexity would have been slower. I think it would have been like n log n just because of the time it takes to sort a list of characters, or string of characters. And so I figured that by using a dictionary that and looping over it, it would just be log n, or sorry, not log n and O of n in terms of the time it takes. And so if we were looking at what would be, would have a quicker run time, I was thinking maybe this would be just a little better than that other way of doing it. I think also if I use a dictionary compared to, there would be, I think, another way to do this that um, I think it would be using a list or something. But the problem with, I think, that other way of doing that would, the dictionary, I think, is a little more accepting of a broader range of um, characters as well that you can use as well too. So if we, for instance, used uppercase or other symbols and characters, I think that would also be better. But I'd have to more fully flesh that out, I guess, before I can uh, absolutely say that. But yeah,
Well, it looks like your solution ran on the first go, and I really appreciated you taking me through um, every step, writing out what you wanted to go and do, and then actually doing the implementation and kind of segmenting out your code. Are there any ways that you think that you could improve upon your current solution?
sure. Yeah. Let's see. I guess I would say, I know I chose in this example to use two dictionaries. I think you could probably do this with just one. So I could make the space complexity a little better. I think if I use just one dictionary, I would probably increment or decrement whether I saw a specific character or not within that same dictionary. And ideally, I think hopefully I would be expecting or wanting to see a frequency count of 0 by the end, I'm guessing. But I think that would be one way to kind of um, just bring in less data structures in order to accomplish this problem. Um, let's see. I think other than that, let's see, range, len, that would be the main thing I think. From a readability standpoint, I guess arguably if I brought in two separate for loops, it could be maybe more easy for someone who's just like, let's say instead I did for character in S and then F character not in book S. And then I also had a for character in T, F character not in book T, that rather than putting all of this into one, there's a readability aspect that I do kind of like and using this as well too. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah,
Yeah, I think that all sounds great. Well, congratulations, Lucas. You have the job. Welcome to
let's go.
Microsoft.
Thank you, thank you. I appreciate it. I'm so excited to join, and it was a pleasure to talk with you today.
Yes, thank you so much for your time. We'll
All
be
right.
reaching out shortly with more details about your offer.
So sounds good.
Thank
I'm
you.
willing to
Well,
work for free. You don't need to pay me.
don't say that. No.
No, now it's time to negotiate.
Right. Exactly. Thank you. That was really helpful to see kind of the process. Do you want to debrief for maybe a minute or two on kind of what you did and why you did it the way that you did? Process oriented, not the actual coding.
Sure, do you want
Sure.
to kick us off? Lucas, or should I kick off with like the things that Lucas I think did really well, and then Zach would also love your input on like things that you saw Lucas doing well and like other things that you could have done better.
Yep. Here, Mitra, I'll let you kick it off. You got this.
Yeah. So I think that Lucas was super, super clear with how he broke down this problem. Like, if you notice, like before we even started he started diving into the solution, he like went and asked clarifying questions. He was looking at potential edge cases. He was like, could there be an empty string? Could um any of the letters inside of this anagram have capital? Could they be capitalized? Are there any special characters that I need to be accounting for? So he started by really like taking the problem statement a step further to make sure he had clarity on what he was trying to solve. He was consistently walking through his solution and like talking to me about like the trade-offs that he was making, and then afterwards, when I asked him about it again, he was able to go and identify another way of solving this problem. Um, but he was able to go and explain that if he went and proceeded with that other solution, from a time complexity perspective, it would be less efficient. So that's why he decided to move forward with using like one for loop and just like the O of N solution, and moving forward with the dictionary. So I think that he did all of those things really, really well. And he had one minor little syntax error, but he really quickly caught it. He went back and like reviewed his code. He ran a test. So I think he did all the right things.
I agree with that. My favorite part, Lucas, was you breaking down your methodology, and Mitra, that was a great first question to ask of why did you do what you did. And I think it was a good example of like starting small and then optimizing to like you could have added, I don't know, more spaces around operators and more details to comments, but these are like little things. Like the most important thing is that he got it working. And then he was able to talk through his thought process. So getting the code working is one thing. Being able to talk through why you did what you did is a whole nother story. And I think you hit both.
Yeah. He even went back and talked about readability. Readability is super
Yeah.
important because at a company like Microsoft, we use we call it the 24/5 model in Surface at least, where like first half of the development on like I don't know, some sort of feature will be happening in the United States for like part of the day, and then it'll transition to somebody else in a completely different part of the world. So if like the solution that you're working through and the code that you're producing isn't readable or understandable or digestible to anybody other than yourself, that's going to um slow down like the product development cycle, and it's going to make your peers' life a lot more difficult. So that was a really good thing to emphasize.
Hmm.
Yeah. No,
That's good.
oh, go ahead, Zach. I'm sorry.
No, I was just gonna say that that was good. I liked how you caught the error too and corrected it.
Oh, sweet. Yeah, yeah. No, and I think one thing I also strive to do, I guess, when you're in the middle of that coding situation is just try to have like be a little playful or have fun with it as well too, where you just having just that maybe whether it's being curious or, you know, I don't know, because I think that can kind of that the energy that you have and share, I think kind of can I don't know, can also make a difference as well too. So yeah, just the one thing to keep in mind too.
Totally. He stayed like cool, calm, and collected when his original code didn't run, and he was like, "Oh, like something's wrong. That's okay. Let me go and fix it." So,
Hmm.
can-do attitude, really important.
All right. Thank you for talking through that. It was very interesting to see that process being done as a non-technical person. So thank you. All right. We have a couple of resources to share with the group. Do one of you want to talk through the first two?
Sure. Yeah, I could talk through. LeetCode, I would say that would be a great resource. There's a lot of great example questions that you can find for different companies based on frequency of use and how recent it's been used in their interview process. Neat code also I think is cool as well too. There's a little roadmap where it kind of you can start kind of at arrays strings and then it'll kind of build in complexity. And so once you kind of do the initial stage, it'll get more and more complex. And so that can be a good way to kind of continue to skill build and have the prerequisites to go on to the next thing. Yeah.
Great. And then I'll put in our chat as well a couple of the documents from CSE. Other colleges have interview prep materials as well, but you're welcome to look at ours. We do have a technical interviewing guide. That's the first link. It's a pretty hefty document, lots of detailed examples, a few additional resources towards the end of that document that could help you prepare for technical interviews. And then I'm also linking to our general interview prep page, which would go more into depth on the STAR technique, doing those offer negotiations. So Lucas, you're not going to work for free, but additional resources that you can check out there. All right, so we've got a few minutes left. I'd like to turn it over to our participants. If you've got any questions, feel free to either use the chat, you can unmute, could raise your hand. But what questions are still left?
I had a question. I believe, Zachary, I think this was on your original tips and tricks slide, but when you're kind of starting with maybe a slower or not optimal solution, and then optimizing once you fledge out that solution, if you were to come to the realization halfway through building that less optimal solution that you had a better idea, is it better to kind of fully fledge out every idea that you propose or kind of stop what you're doing and restart with something else?
Oh wow, that's a great question, Sam. I suppose it would depend like how deep you were, how far you were into it. Um, if it's a if it's a very bad mistake, I would probably start over again. And I don't think an interviewer would knock any points off for you doing that and being honest. I do that all the time in my day-to-day job. We do a lot of architecture and solution designing, and sometimes we get halfway through and we find something we don't need or something that we should add is necessary. And it's always good to just have that open dialogue to say, you know what, I realized I think I could do this better and I could optimize this. Because I suppose in day to day, or if you're in your everyday role and you get hired by Microsoft, sometimes a mistake like that might cost money, or it might ruin, an engagement with a partner or a customer, or another engineering team you're working on with a project. So I would say my advice would be to just walk through your thought process and say, hey, I'm like halfway into this, but I do think there's a better way, if you don't mind, that I could do this. And I don't think any interviewee or interviewer would look down upon you for saying that. Lucas, Mitra, do you have anything to add? Have you been in that scenario?
I think that that's a really great call out because I think that that happens all the time, Zachary, as you were saying, in like the real world too, like outside of the scope of an interview, like you'll be halfway through a solution and you'll realize like, oh, I could do this in a more optimal way. And then by asking and opening up that conversation, it allows like your manager, or in this case, like your kind of manager role would be the interviewer, to see if they should prioritize like the trade-off of timing, of cost, of like actual solution implementation time. Because if you're operating under a deadline and you're like, hey, I have a less optimal solution, but it needs to be pushed out that day, you don't want to just like scrap everything and start over and then miss a potential deadline. So I think if anything, it's just like a good conversation to have with the interviewer and say like, "Hi, I realize that there's actually a better way of doing this," and they'll probably applaud you for recognizing that there is a better way, and then also for
Absolutely.
like having that conversation of saying like, "Oh, I only have a little bit more time left, so do you want me to prioritize going with um like the more optimal solution or just like getting it done?" So yeah, I think that sort of communication is really valuable in like day-to-day work too. So it'll only benefit you to ask.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you guys.
Is another question in the chat. What are some questions that are okay to ask an interviewer during the technical interview and what aren't okay?
I would.
Would
Oh,
would
let's
be
go.
not okay. Sorry, I interrupted you, Lucas.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Mitra. Yeah.
Um, I don't know. I don't know if I've ever encountered a question that would be not okay. I think at the end of the day, like you can ask whatever question. It's obviously up to your discretion of like what would be like appropriate, but I think like any question is a valid question. Um, and if like the interviewer can answer it, they will answer it, and if they can't answer it, they won't. That's my perspective. But Lucas and Zach, I'll let you guys chime in on that.
I I think sometimes it depends upon phrasing. Like, let's say someone could say, like, how much am I going to get paid? Like, what am I making? Or something. Like, maybe you would want to say it like that. You would say, like, oh, for this position, what is like the compensation range based upon, experience or your qualifications? Or you could say, like, another question would be like, how much vacation do I get? I want to go on vacation the first week I start or something. Like maybe you wouldn't say it like that. You'd be like, oh, how does the team balance work priorities, or what is, the I don't know. There's I think just different ways of maybe getting to the source of what you're asking. You could like say, for instance, if you wanted to know about work-life balance or, how team culture or what you could ask like, hey, what's your philosophy around performance management, or how do you motivate people, and how is the team, are they distributed, are they hybrid, and so sometimes there's just I think ways of phrasing that and asking that just you can just be a little more professional, but you can get to the source of maybe what you're wondering. So yeah.
I love the question in interviews of like what is operational excellence, or even like how could I contribute, or how could I be a fit to your team, or best be a fit to your team. Because I'll tell you, and I'll be honest with you, but also if you're interviewing with someone else, they'll tell you exactly what they're looking for. And then you're able to hopefully frame some of your responses in your replies to best fit exactly what they're looking for in what's a perfect candidate. So let them tell you what's an ideal candidate. I love when interviewers ask that question of like, how could I contribute to your team and drive impact? Doesn't need to be complex, doesn't need to be sophisticated. Just be yourself and ask questions. Don't ask if you can use like third-party tools for some of your interviews. I know we were all laughing and talking about yesterday, like Interview Coder. Don't use Interview Coder. You're going to make us fly you all out to Redmond and watch you in person code, and it's going to be such a hassle for everyone involved. We're already we're already kind of transitioning a lot of FANG and big tech companies are to in-person technical interviews. So don't ruin it for everybody else. And yeah, don't ask if you can use tools.
All right, I'm noticing the time. Zach, I know you need to hop off, so I will let you do so to respect your time. Thank you so much for all of your insights today. I know there's another question. Lucas can hang around to answer that one. Mitra, I'm
Yep.
not sure what your schedule is like and if you need to hop off or if you can stay on for a minute or two, but do whatever is best for your schedule. But yeah, thank you everyone for providing such a good panel today. I really appreciate it. Okay, and if you all need to hop off too, feel free to do what's best for your schedules. Lucas, do you see the question
Yep.
from Sadie?
Yeah, yep, I see it. So I would say, how long did I study? So I would say sometimes it came in spurts based upon what was going on during the semester. I'd probably had at least 30 questions, 30, 40 questions maybe under my belt, of leak code before I ended up going into an interview. but it definitely came in spurts. So sometimes maybe there was an aspect of when I was doing 1133 or 1933 and where I just wanted to get a little more familiar with different types of problems that I would be solving and coding. And it was just more to just get more competency. But I think at the backdrop of that, there was an aspect that I knew that hopefully that'd be helpful for some future coding interview or would just give me more experience using the language and seeing different sets of problems. But I think I don't know. Sometimes I feel like if you have maybe enough base built, I've always kind of leaned towards um, being secure and comfortable with all my classes and projects and that versus kind of just um, treading more water while putting a ton of time in elite code. But I guess it depends upon maybe how maybe you deeply want a certain position or how much demanding their interview process will be. Yeah, I don't know. I think that I would say for the average student, I imagine like even if they haven't done a lot of leak code, maybe even a few weeks of an hour or a few hours a day could at least get them up to a point where some of the more approachable problems you can feel more comfortable and assured trying to do. But yeah.
Any other last minute questions? All right. Well, Lucas, thanks for closing us out. I appreciate it.
Yeah, feel free if anyone has any like follow-up questions, wants to reach out, connect on LinkedIn. Happy to be a resource or just connect with students. So yeah, hopefully this was helpful. Thanks for everyone's questions and coming and watching us. So good luck with just all your interview processes and semester. Hope classes go well and yeah, hopefully to maybe I'll get to see one of you here at Microsoft someday. So.
All right. Thank you. Have a good rest of your day.